All right, so then we'll open up the council committee meeting, July 19th, 2016.
There you go, big guy.
All right, the first thing on the, yeah, watch it. First thing on the agenda is our, under police, and we don't have Mrs. Pitts or yeah, we don't have Mrs. Pitts or Mrs. Kyle here. But this is regarding parking 8 feet from the driveway regulations. I guess I'll go ahead and talk about this. I had gotten an email, a complaint from a resident on Carriage Hill that has consistently complained about there being too many cars parked there. It's tough to get around. If you've ever driven, Carriage Hill is one way, and if you've ever driven around there, oh no, I'm sorry, excuse me. Hold on a second, I said that. It's not one way. Yeah, excuse me, it's not. Yeah, the problem comes when a car is coming the other way, and the person who's driving on the side where the cars park has to kind of duck between driveways to get out of the way of the other car. It's a very narrow street. So this gentleman had gotten upset because his nephew had gotten a ticket for parking too close to the driveway, to a driveway. This was around the corner and not on Carriage Hill. But the regulation that city has currently, and I don't have the number in front of me, which ordinance that is, but it says that nobody can park within 8 feet of a driveway. Mark, are you ready to talk about this?
I have it. I have the ordinance. It's in our parking regulation. Along with that one, but yeah, prohibited. Yeah, there was 3 things that are prohibited. In there along, it's 20 feet from an intersection, it's 10 feet from a fire hydrant, and it's 8 feet from any private driveway other than a driveway located within a circular cul-de-sac, which is something we need to talk about, at the end of a street. So that, besides that, those are the general regulations for what those are.
Okay.
And I believe at the time, and that 8 feet has been here, and the chief and I talked about this. I know if the chief wants to come up too, please do. A little bit yesterday and today. I think when this was originally done, part of it was because of mailboxes right at the corners of the driveways so that the Postal Service could have access to those mailboxes. I know in some parts of town now that doesn't apply. Some of our parts, the older part that I live in, it really doesn't apply. My mailbox is on my house. But there are some places out there in particular, and I believe all through Spring Valley. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure they got the mailboxes that are like community mailboxes that you're seeing in all the new neighborhoods now. I know Misty Creek and some of the other areas, they all have that. So that was why that was, I think, initially put into play, that 8 foot.
That makes sense. I hadn't even thought about the postal delivery.
So if, in fact, we're looking to change that, I do think we have to address that issue. The chief and I talked about blocking those like that.
We also did that because of school buses and our plow trucks.
That was cul-de-sacs. Right, yeah, so that's something that, and I had a request from a resident, as a matter of fact, I believe it was in your neighborhood, that asked us to reconsider us allowing parking in the cul-de-sacs. And I don't know if some of you were on city council when that occurred. When I first started here, we did not allow people to park in cul-de-sacs. Then we changed it to this, what it is today. And again, that 8 foot doesn't apply within the cul-de-sac. So, and that's because there's not 8 feet usually in cul-de-sacs between the driveways. Cars are probably, there's not that 8 feet leadway on each side of the driveway. So, those are all kind of issues when you're looking at changing those things and doing that. During the recodification review, we sat with every department and went through all of these ordinances the way it existed, all of the codification as it was. During Public Works' meeting, they brought up that they would like to see, and it was funny because I got the email from the lady about 2 weeks after this, that they would like to see parking prohibited in the cul-de-sacs, that they have a real issue with it. And also, when you think about it, I think our garbage Pickup people have an issue with it. Also school buses in some of those areas on the other side of town where county schools come and the school buses in those cul-de-sacs, they have a difficult time and make the kids walk out of those cul-de-sacs because they can't get down in there. So there's all kind of things to consider. I know numerous cities around us do prohibit that parking from in there. Also, I know that those people that live in that cul-de-sac are probably going to want to keep the parking there also. So I think it's two-sided in the decision that I guess we have to make at some point on that one.
Right. Yeah, I know all you have to do is ride in the snowplows one time to realize how much more difficult that makes it when someone doesn't get out of the cul-de-sac.
Terrible. We get
Yeah.
complaints every year about it.
Right.
We end up pushing snow into somebody's driveway or blocking something, and then they call and want us to come back and get that out. So it's an issue every year.
Yeah.
It is. It is. There was also one that Public Works wanted, and talking to the police chief, we agree with this one also. The way the ordinance reads right now is 20 foot from any intersection of private streets or ways. So it doesn't say 20 foot from the stop sign. So what we would like to add to that is 20 foot from the stop sign. If you're looking at some of these intersections, you know, the stop sign is 5 to 8 feet back from the actual intersection. And always the way that this has been measured for enforcement is to square off the corner, whether it be the intersection of the street, we square off driveways, do that whole thing. So it's not really the apron that comes out this way, it's where the driveway would come out straight. It's always how that has been measured in the past. So some instances, and Ed's here, he could probably tell you where a lot of these are throughout the city. A lot of those, you know, the cars are parked so close to the intersections at that point in time, because it's actually 20 feet from the intersection, but it's not 20 feet back from the stop sign, and cars do not have, when they come around to stop, don't have enough room to stop and get completely out of the way.
I agree.
Mr.
Okay.
Reynolds, yeah.
You try to come on Commonwealth Avenue on one of those side streets and you can't, and no car's coming down the street, you're.
Right. Now, there's all kind of instances all over the place.
Go ahead, Mr. Biox.
The current subdivision regulation required a minimum of 25-foot radiuses on the corner, so anything closer than 25 feet is actually getting into the radius of the turning movement around the corners.
Unless we say it's from the stop sign,
Yeah.
which probably makes more sense.
But there are some intersections where there aren't stop signs.
Correct.
So whether or not we do this and move it back to 25 or whatever it is, just to address that issue on both, because there are some places that don't, that you know, there's not like a three-way or a four-way stop, there's a two-way stop, the through traffic goes through, so.
Also remember that when we discussed the driveway issue, and I've been here a long time, it was not only the mailboxes, it was the fact that we do permit parking on one side of the street. There, as long as the street is adequate, a 25-foot street most of the cases, in some cases less, it's almost impossible for people to turn in the driveways on the side where the cars are parked if they park that close to the driveway.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think my question was, you know, or at least when it was brought to my attention, my thought was someone that's from outside the city, or even people that are inside the city, you know, how do they know? You know, if they're to park too close to a driveway, you know, I'm sure they're not getting out and measuring to make sure they're 8 feet away, and they get a ticket for that.
And I just want to say something about enforcement, and Chief, please correct me if I'm wrong, okay, on this one. But, you know, it has been the practice of the police department to not aggressively enforce that. If there is a complaint, then we go and enforce it the way it's always been. We don't have people running around 24/7 measuring to see how far cars are parked back from driveways. Just don't have the manpower to do that. So that's a hit and miss. And I know that their operating procedure is if, in fact, they get that complaint, go to that car, they try to notify the owner of that car. And if, in fact, it is somebody from out of town that is there, the likelihood is that they're from another city, so they can't go knock on the door and say, hey, back your car up a little bit. The neighbor has complained about it being too close and blah, blah, blah. So, you know, those are the kind that usually end up getting citations. Did I speak correctly?
Yes, yeah, that's normally what we do. And if it is someone, if they run the registration, if it's someone from out of town, they'll try and do a courtesy citation unless it sits there for more than 24 hours. And then people don't get their trash collected or mail, so then they're going to issue a ticket. And then from that point on, they'll impound it if it just remains. So, but typically, it's not something that they aggressively enforce because
Okay.
there's not that much room between the driveways as it is.
How many complaints are we actually talking about?
Complaints on people parking too close to driveways?
Yeah.
Very few. I mean, there's maybe 20 a year that people actually call and ask, but we get more complaints about cars remaining in one spot for a greater length of time than anything.
So with only 20 complaints, is it worth doing anything?
That's a guess.
Well, I mean, part of the point why I wanted to bring it up is that in talking with the chief, he had mentioned that if we enforce this strictly, we'd be writing hundreds of tickets a day. It's happening all over the city. And, so to me, it seems like that it may not be a fair law if we're only writing a ticket or bringing it up out of convenience. It's not the same across the board. Does that make sense?
The times that the tickets are typically written, like I said, is when they don't get their mail. And people get pretty upset when they're not getting their mail, so we'll write a ticket. Usually the courtesy citation gets people's attention, or the big orange sticker, move your car. But, if they're just not gonna cooperate, then the ticket's issued. Because like the mayor said, we would be writing them all day long. And you're not really gonna accomplish anything because, as we discussed, that these streets and driveways were all built, for the most part, before everybody in the household had a car, and there's 4 or 5 cars. The driveways aren't big enough to accommodate all the vehicles that everybody owns, so they park them on the street.
So even, no, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Well,
Yeah.
I was gonna say too, if you go to some of our older streets, I guess, I'm trying to think Division or something, one that goes this way. A lot of those older houses don't have driveways, and so the people have to park, and they're only allowed to park on one side because God bless Public Works. I don't even know how they get down there when it snows because you just have this little lane to go down, and they're all parked, stacked on top of each other. And even on my street, which probably was built in the 60s, most of the driveways are one-car garages. And so, like you said, a lot of people have 3 or 4 cars, and we're only allowed to park on the one side. So a lot of my neighbors, they do park on the street. And I think the people who live on the corner probably do park close to the stop sign. But I mean, I don't think that they're bothering anything. We don't have mailboxes out there or anything like that. So I'm thinking maybe, I kind of agree with the mayor that I don't know how we could make a rule that's going to apply to the whole city because every subdivision is different as far as mailboxes and driveways.
I mean, isn't 8-foot rule pretty much standard everywhere, though?
I can't speak for any place else, to be honest with
Every place I go visit somebody, and if I go, am I too close to the mailbox? And they go, no, it's 8 feet. I always hear 8 feet.
And the 8 feet, it's mainly for mailboxes and then 10 feet from the hydrant, so.
But that's good to know. I mean, and that's what I just more so wanted to bring it up for discussion. If council seems to think that we should just leave it alone, and the main reason too I bring it up is, we're still going through these issues with American Legal, going through the process with American Legal, and if we're going to change something, now is a good time to do it rather than, a few more months and having to
Pay for it.
pay for it. Yeah.
But like Mr. Fields stated, we get some neighborhoods that don't want, on the other end, cul-de-sac parking, but in some streets, we get, vehement responses that they don't want people to park there. Some do, some don't. But the intersection one is probably one that and the cul-de-sacs are the ones that we probably need to look at a little more closely because of the emergency equipment and the snow plowing. And the intersection ordinance is designed for safety so other traffic can pass and you can make the turns into bigger vehicles, just to keep people away from the middle of the road.
So maybe we should amend that portion of it and say 20 feet, or did we say 20 or 25 feet? 25 feet from the stop sign?
But does that make much of a difference if we're not going to go around measuring?
If it
different, isn't it,
stays
than it is
there
now?
and somebody calls it in.
From any stop sign?
So if you just change it to 25 feet from the intersection, the same way Mr. Biaux was saying the radius of that turn, that would probably, talking to Ed, would accomplish the very same thing, so.
We have people on Deer Chase that park real close to that stop sign that turns on in Nelson.
Yeah.
It doesn't give you any room to turn.
Yeah, I know.
It messes up the sight distance and
Yeah,
stuff
I
too. You
agree.
can't see
I agree.
past them. Okay. Oh, yeah.
I don't know if we
Kyle.
already have this or not, but I've seen signs before that say, no parking from here to the curb or whatever. I mean, you could do that, I mean, and.
If you tried to do that in every intersection, you know what that would cost us?
Intersection in every cul
Sometimes people,
And every time, every place you see that around, in this parking ordinance, when you guys look at the code, there are several different parking things in here, and they have single streets because of those special circumstances, like in front of the schools. You know, you see it in front of the elementary schools, no parking between here and here, these hours. So each one of those that have been, I guess, made over the years, we used to do them by ordinance. Now we can do them with the mayor's authority in conjunction with the police chief to make those changes. You don't have to do an ordinance every time we change one of those. But there are numerous, and I can't even tell you how many that are actually in this. You know, when you really start looking through this the way we said and look through each one, I even asked the attorneys in our meeting this past week, I said, do we have to list every one of these streets this way? I said, because it is something that is just, I mean, you know, where every stop sign is, where every no parking place is, where every snow emergency street is, I mean, where every speed limit, I mean, it's all in there, and they're each listed in there. So it's really a, you know, 90-some pages, I think, is what that whole parking and traffic thing is, 90-some pages in there. So there's a lot. So we were discussing ways to maybe make that a little easier to keep up with. I think we've come up with something. But we thought, and we had talked, and please, Jack and Frank, correct me if I'm wrong, but to put all these things together, these changes that we've suggested, and put them into the form of maybe one ordinance or one executive order on the parking and things like that, but everything else we need to change in maybe one ordinance, and just adopting the one ordinance to change all those. Is that what we had talked about?
That's right, and as stop signs came up, as different things changed, we would change that yearly through with a muni order, or on the fly with an executive order, either way.
And keep a master list of
Yeah,
those,
there's got to be,
and
yeah.
put it on the website, do something other than codifying it through the codification if it was done by executive order.
okay. Sure.
8 feet from driveways or 8 feet from mailboxes that are on the street?
Driveways.
So that, I mean, that eliminates, on Price Avenue, that would eliminate a lot of parking spots, even though you don't go after people.
I know.
They're breaking the law. So would it make more sense to make it 8 feet from mailboxes? Because that's really the concern.
The mailbox is on that street.
So I said you have to address that issue. I think that would be, I think that'd be the one issue.
We don't on Price, we don't on Price.
There's just other places where if you do park within that 8 feet, that's gonna be very difficult for people to pull in and out of their driveway, especially if they're backing out onto a road.
Car behind them.
Would it make sense to be 4 feet instead of 8 feet? 8 feet eliminates a lot of parking spots.
That's the way it is now. I mean, that's.
Yeah, and I just like to say one thing about the enforcement side of this, because I've heard this tonight. Folks, every law that's in this country is not enforced 100%. I mean, everybody that runs a stop sign does not get a ticket for running that stop sign. Does that mean we should make it not legal to run that stop sign? Everybody that goes 56 miles an hour in a 55 doesn't get a ticket. Does that mean we should make the speed limit 56? So I think the enforcement of this is on a case-by-case basis. It's discretionary. That will always be there in law enforcement. You'll never get rid of that, no matter what we do. It's always going to be discretionary with those things, and you can't do one, because we have so many different neighborhoods around here that one ordinance does not, or one regulation can't apply every place. And we've seen that over the years. You go up to Jacqueline Drive, Concord Drive up there, and those areas, you know, every one of those cul-de-sacs up there, I guarantee you, if we say no parking in those cul-de-sacs, every one of those people will be in this council chamber and be complaining about that, where people on the other side of town will be cheering it. So I don't know, you know, what the answer is, to be
There's
honest.
not a one-size-fits-all answer for
No,
this.
No,
Okay.
I don't think so.
Well, I appreciate you entertaining that. Does anybody else have any other ideas there? Okay, we'll move on to the next thing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I don't think so. You have to do it street by street.
All right,
So-
the next thing on the agenda is under building, zoning, and codes. Mr. Dunhoff, Mr. Burke.
We're gonna turn
The-
it over to Mr. Hahn.
Okay.
What we gave you, Dave's coming up here. But
Thank you.
the Houston Road zoning, and David and I have talked about this a lot. That property that we've talked about down there, and if you're looking at the two lots that are on the left-hand side as you go down, that we ended up buying, not the old concrete plant, but where they used to park all the trucks, okay, on the left-hand side as you're going up towards the Showcase property. That is zoned residential right now. I'm real sure that we don't want to try to dispose of this while it's still zoned residential. So I think that's what David and I were talking about. So we had talked about it, looked at it, and going to make a suggestion about, or a recommendation about maybe how we can rezone that.
You should all have in front of you one of these things that looks something like this. If you look on there, on about the middle, lower middle of the page, you see where it says R3. Those are those two lots that the city currently owns. Those are two of the lots that at the past council meeting we included in the
Surplus
for
property.
the surplus property. So those are zoned R3. Then across the street from there, this is on Houston Road. Yeah. If you see what looks like a big white area there, that's the old concrete plant. That is zoned IP1, Industrial Park 1. Does everybody see those areas?
Yep.
Yes.
You see right here? Corinne.
Right here.
That's the concrete plant.
Right. This whole thing.
Oh, it says IP1.
Oh, there it is. Okay, there we go.
From the zoning day, what are
Oh, there it is. Okay.
What, I'm sorry?
zoning of the two lots across from the concrete?
R3.
It does, it's just gotta look really hard, because I couldn't find it either.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
These two lots.
Because that's
And
what
there you
I'm
just
like,
gotta look real hard.
Then the other side is IP1.
Yeah.
Then also attached is those zones, of the zones that both of these abut, which is the IP1 and the HC2. As Mark and I were talking, if you look at the uses and the property that is currently where the Beacon Orthopedic building is, the property that is zoned, if you remember, some of you all that were here when we talked about where the, up at the end of Vioxx Drive, where the what was that, CarMax was talking about going, that is all zoned HC2. If you flip back that page one time, attached is the HC2 zone that shows all of the permitted uses in that particular zone. So as Mark and I were talking, we felt that probably should be the zone that these properties be zoned, that rezoned to. So we just wanted to bring these forward to you, look at them, solicit some discussion if you all agree or disagree with those uses that would go in that zone. And
So you're talking about that spot with the R3?
the R3 and the old concrete plant across the street would be rezoned to the HC2 zone.
So HC2
Why-
zone, can you put restaurants in HC2?
Yes. Yes. You can see there's 40-some uses that are permitted in that zone. We worked with the owners of the property where the CarMax place was considering going, and if you all may remember, and this is the zone that we came up with for that particular piece. So
Didn't we have somebody interested in actually buying some of that property? And would that fit into the HC2?
yes,
Yes. The air conditioning, heating place?
Yeah.
Yeah.
yes.
I think it would be called an office.
Where does that fall into?
The office and,
I was thinking it would be an office. What,
Okay.
Allows offices, it allows, let me find it here. Household electrical appliance stores, so on. So yes, it would be a permitted use,
David, we put number 4 in there for CarMax,
correct?
but they didn't agree to some of our regulations. I'm just wondering, do we need to bump that out of there, or?
Well, they agreed with this.
Yeah.
I know. we
This has
gotta-
been changed to reflect that,
Okay,
yes.
okay.
To reflect that what, that's what I'm saying. They came back in and we worked with them to get this, and they did end up agreeing with it.
But there was something right at the end that they didn't want to agree with, and I thought that's what turned it. No?
No.
Okay. I guess we just decided not to do that?
Not to do it at that particular time, decided not to change the zone.
Cut back.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I thought it had something
close
to
to
do
the
with
Kendall
odometer,
store.
or,
Yeah.
I don't know. I could be wrong.
To me, it seems like that makes sense. It's an adjoining zone. So
Okay.
it wouldn't be that big of a deal to extend it for those two other lots. Now, are you thinking that you would also extend it into this flag over here too?
So that was gonna be.
Yeah, I would take in that, all of that, well, that flag part down there
It's all stream.
is pretty much along the creek.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would not want, I wouldn't think we'd want it,
Leave that alone.
or.
Leave it alone or just?
Or take it to the, also to the.
The HC2.
The HC2 zone.
That's
I
that
think-
watershed, isn't it?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
all,
Can't build anything down there.
yeah. So we could leave it, whatever you wanted to do.
You can make it all the same.
I would think you'd leave it alone. Is that what you said, JD? I mean, because you're alerting, what, 20 more homeowners? And you're making them think that potentially they could have a liquor store built in their backyard? Or whatever, I mean, some of the things that are on here,
So just the two lots
that's what I would think.
and the concrete plant.
Right. Yep. And then make a recommendation next meeting.
I'll write something up, and so,
I think we should change that, or should think that should stay IP1? I was kind of thinking that the concrete plant stay IP1.
make it all one.
Make it all one? Any thoughts on that?
I'll have something for you to, so you can react to that.
Well, but you also
at the
have that
next council meeting.
HC2 next to it on the other side, on that bottom side of that picture.
Oh, yeah.
IP1 is,
Or do you leave it where it is for now, as IP1? You said it's IP1 now, the concrete plant?
I'm sorry.
The concrete plant, is that IP1 now?
It is IP1 now. Yeah.
Does it create an island for that institutional zone? Is that surrounded by HC2 then?
Yes.
Is that a problem?
I don't think it's a problem. They have the necessary acreage to be a standalone zone. They're in that, and that was done by design just because of that particular use, of their institutional type of use is the reason that was selected at that time when they were looking to build there.
So long as they never want to expand, right?
Yeah.
I have a question. So is Showcase itself IP1?
Yes.
Yes.
So when I look at the descriptions of IP1 versus HC2, it's not near as nice.
IP1?
Yeah.
IP1 is more industrial.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
I mean, that's such a nice area. Wouldn't you want to like change that to something more appealing?
If you're ready to fight that battle, we can have at it. That would be a battle. Oh, yeah.
I mean, is there anybody looking at it right now?
No.
So wouldn't that
Well,
be the time to do it?
Sort of, but I can tell you that whenever as Mr. Wickman could tell you, Mr. Viox, time ago when we were talked about doing that very thing, changing to allow some retail uses, the next thing we knew, they didn't like it one bit and really fought us, so, yes.
Yeah, didn't you say there was lawyers that came in here from New Jersey or?
There was,
whatever?
yeah, they had, yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, they'll fight that.
They just didn't want any of their zoning changed unless they had a particular use, then they'd go ahead and agree to it.
do is find something real appealing to go in there and then say, hey, these people will buy this if you let
That's
us
a,
change the.
I agree. Then they would certainly agree with that.
Okay, well, that's what we need to do.
All right.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
I noticed in IP1, you have hospitals and also in HC2, it also has hospitals. Is there a difference, or they just are allowed both?
They're just allowed in both.
Okay.
Yeah.
We were trying to encourage in hospitals in that
We were,
area.
correct, encourage medical uses on there, so when we changed it for the property out on, where they're building the hospital now, on Dulwick,
Yeah.
we went ahead and changed that at the same time.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hahn.
David, I got just one question. I'm actually just a general question on the map itself.
Oh, okay.
Is Pin Oak Lane a IP1 zone, or is that stand out by itself?
What's, Pin Oak?
Yeah, that's a property
Pin Oak
line.
is in the IP1 zone, yes.
Okay.
That's just a piece of property, why it's singled out, as you see on the map there, it was purchased later, so they own, Showcase owns that property, but it was just a separate piece.
Okay, I was just wondering.
Yeah.
All right. Any other discussion on that? We'll move on. Next item is the disposal process.
Yeah. So, Dave and I had talked an awful long time about, how to do this and how we could hopefully encourage some kind of economic development on some of this property that we have now declared surplus. So how do we go about disposing of that property? Well, from talking to the attorneys, we obviously have to go through some kind of bid. We have to put out a request for proposals and advertise that, and then get proposals back and have a way to evaluate those proposals for best use for what we see as economic, I guess, maybe development or improvement throughout the years. So, looking at this, and, this pretty much just tells about how we want to score it. So we'll put these proposals out, unless everybody doesn't want to, but more than anything, we wanted to look at the percentages and how we're going to judge those proposals when they come back and see. Like I said, this is pretty much Dave's first stab at it, of looking at this. But what we thought was the future use of the property and what benefit that it would have back to the community, to the city, that it should have that a great weight. So that's why we put 40% on that part of it. The proposed investment in the property was another 40%. The highest bidder was 10%, and the proposed applicable codes about what's going in there, making sure all the codes are followed in the zoning, that would be the other 10%. That's just our kind of first stab at this. So our thought was, and our thought process was in coming up with that, is what would the long-term benefit to the city and the community be? That's why it's designed that way. Instead, we would put a lower weight on that initial price of the property, because we'd rather see somebody say, well, we're going to do this, and it's going to bring 100 jobs and blah, 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 to this, and then the long-term, I think, benefit to the city is this. That's the way we looked at it. So we'll just throw that out and open it up for discussion.
You talked about it once before, sitting here. Yeah.
I like it. I think it's a great way of dealing with it.
And we don't have to accept it.
No.
No.
That's what I'm saying, so we get it, discuss it before us, we get to look at it and say, okay.
Get to look at it, what it is.
Time and paper.
Do we get?
Reserve the right, it says on there, we reserve the right to reject all bids. I guess you're allowed to do that.
Yeah. Do we get more revenue from payroll or from property taxes?
Well, it's according to what the building would
Depends
be
what the
worth, but payroll in the long run, I would say, is absolutely it. Steve's sitting back there now, and I mean, when you're looking at the revenues coming in, our payroll is pretty good. So, yeah.
Should we weight that higher?
Then 40.
I mean, weight it higher than the investment in the property.
Well, that's up to you all. I mean, that was our stab at it, so, yeah.
Yeah, I don't,
I mean, aren't the
I don't
payroll
know.
tax and
These
the,
three pieces, you also need to
aren't those pretty close to the same?
Their front door to all the rest
I
of
couldn't
it.
hear you,
I was
sir.
wondering, I'm trying to think back to, you know, those budget items, and I was thinking they were really close to the same, aren't they?
Crap there, that's what you're gonna. crap
Payroll
there.
tax and property tax?
The overall.
Yeah, but it's,
Yeah.
I think it's according to what goes in there. So if you have an office building go in there that has, 50 office workers, and you're gonna get payroll from those 50, and that investment in that building's $5 or $10 million, we know what the taxes are gonna be on that. But then long-term, okay, so now somebody else wants to build that same 5 or 10, million-dollar building, then, they're gonna bring 10 employees in there, and their salaries are gonna be this. So I see your point, but I don't think we can just basically say, because I think it's development by development about what's gonna bring in more money. I don't think we can make a blanket statement, because they're about even throughout when you're looking at all the taxes, throughout that, but yeah.
Okay.
I think what you guys got presented to Pat.
I like it.
I like it too. Just being devil's advocate on this, if somebody wins the bid and then don't develop the land, what
That's
happens?
what we were thinking.
We were going to talk about that as well.
Right.
How can that be handled? And I didn't know that. I thought that was
Attorney question.
for these learned men.
Yeah.
We can look into it. I mean, I know that's a punt. I feel like a University of Kentucky football player here tonight, but I mean, I think it's going to be challenging, honestly, but I think we can certainly work with
I
it.
didn't know, and that's why the one thing is in there that talks about when will you be doing your development, and if, they could say 2 years, okay, that's good, but what if they don't,
Right.
Yeah.
So
Is there
in the
language we
sales
could put in the
contract
bid
or
that
Yeah,
whatever,
in the
some of
sales
How do you enforce it?
contract,
Start,
that's
maybe
something
they
we
would
can-
sell it back to the city for the same price they bought it.
You can condition the sale any way you want to. If you want it developed in a year, you put that in there. If you wanted 5 years, you put 5 years in, and you put what the default remedy is, either.
Right.
So if they fill
Back
out,
to us for what you paid for it, or
if they fill out this form and say 2 years, then that's what and that is the selected person that the council would choose, then that would be in the sales contract,
If they
I
don't, they
guess.
say the
Then
property's ours.
But
they
you're going to have to
start
enforce
development
that.
2 years.
Right.
What if you didn't, yeah, okay, I guess that makes more sense. Sorry.
But from a practical
we had that same
perspective, you're
question,
going to
yeah.
then have to enforce that, or you're going to have to,
you put
That
on
sounds
bid,
expensive.
the lower your price is gonna be. That's a given.
Right.
If you load it up with conditions, you have to develop it within a year, you have to use it for whatever we think is appropriate, that automatically is gonna depress your price.
Well, and that's why
Best
we
price
put
you're
it,
gonna get is a sale with
that's
no
why it's in
conditions.
there weighted as it is, so that people can say that, they might say, no, I might not build for 10 years, then council then can decide if they want
If they want to do that or not.
if they want to do that or not.
Okay.
I just like to take one part of the thing out of it myself is,
But, the main thing we're looking at.
Hold on one second. Bill was just, go ahead, the floor.
I was just gonna say, I see that the city of Rolling reserves the right to reject any or all proposals submitted for any reason. I'd like to see that for any reason taken out. That's just my thoughts. It's just.
It usually goes out on all of our bids that way. I mean, I've seen that language. It's normally in all of our bids. The one you guys just approved, I'm sure, was in that same RFP that went out. We have the right to reject any for no reason whatsoever. So I don't know. That's up to the attorneys. That's usually in there, so.
I would not recommend taking it out, that's for sure.
Should stay in. It's on all our construction bids.
Because then you're held to it. I think then you're held to it. I mean, I think it's going to be fair, don't get me wrong, and we're going to weight it this way and look at it, and we're going to have a justification for why we issued that bid. But there may be some other reason that you don't want any of them, and just to give you that out and not be tied into
Gotta
it.
have an out.
So,
Yeah, say if everybody came back and the lowest bid that came in was, or I mean, the highest bid that came in was $1 that they're going to pay for it, or whatever it might be, we said, well, we don't want to sell it for $1. We don't want to be held. That's one instance.
Right. No, I agree, yeah.
I interrupted you, JD, I'm sorry.
That's what I was getting at is, first of all, we want to get rid of the properties. We don't want to be landowners. So, you know, to sit there and tell a person that they gotta develop the property in 1 year, I think, how long have we owned it? How long has it been vacant? So, you know, at least give them some time to develop it, but at the same time, you know, we've owned several of these lots and they've been vacant for how long now? We haven't developed them. But then again, we don't want to be landowners, we want to get rid of them, so.
I like that. I like this idea.
I like this idea too, this way it gives us a leeway out, in and out.
Yep.
And if I understood Mr. Wickman, what he was saying is the more conditions we put on there, the better chance we have at reducing
Right.
the price, because it's gonna be more restrictive.
That's how I understood it.
So I'd be, and then if there's the cost to enforce it, I'd say let's have as few as restrictions as we would really need on there, with the goal of getting rid of the property, and we're gonna, you know, they're gonna have a plan there in place.
I don't think somebody's just gonna buy a piece of land to sit on it, they're gonna buy it, they're gonna develop, just like the guy that's gonna do the air conditioning place. Yeah. That's why he wanted to buy that property, he's gonna develop it right away, so I feel if we put these things out there and people see them, they're gonna wanna develop.
I think it's great. I think that's,
Good.
for taking a stab at that, I think that's really good.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Question?
Thank you.
Yeah, Renee?
Are we gonna advertise? I mean, how does
Yeah.
somebody know to, okay, and then where do you advertise? Just in the paper or?
And the way I understand it, you can actually just do it on your website. I don't
There's
know that
provision
you
under
have to do it any
KRF,
other way.
which allows the website.
Right.
I have another, and this may sound really petty, but the dates in this thing have to be right too.
Oh, yeah.
That's just a draft. That was the day we wrote it, and that was the day we put it.
I wrote it,
Right,
so.
yeah.
Well, you know, I read it.
Okay, so-
All right.
So we'll come up with another one. We'll send it to the attorneys for their approval, and then we'll have it back to you all for your final approval.
Thank you.
Is that good?
Yeah, thank you.
All right, you're up.
All right, on to the next item.
This should be brief, I guess. If you remember the property the gentleman that owns the property at Stevenson and Turkey Foot requested that we do some, and you all at a council meeting, it gave me the authority to go down and file the application to do that text amendment that we talked about. When I went down there, they brought up a good point. They said that it has little, as I was talking with them about it, that it would have little chance of getting approved through the Planning Commission just because it's a whole separate zone that we have that kind of mixes the residential with the commercial. They said you already have a zone like that. And you're right. We have a PO1 zone right up on Erlanger Road that is in that first block of Erlanger Road from the Dixie Highway back to Home Street. It's called PO1 and it allows certain types of commercial uses and residential and that sort of thing. They said that would have it doesn't matter much to the city because we're just doing the text. So that would go through, but it would, when the person then would take that text, our new zone that you all gave me the authority to do, the Planning Commission, they said, would have a very, very tough time approving that for them to do the development. So they suggested that we take those conditional use is that you all approved and apply them in that PO1 zone that we already have and just have that as the text. That way a person could select that text to do the development on that. So it's not a big change to you all other than you gave me the authority to change it to the NC whatever zone it was that we called that, R1.
Well, that was the new zone we were going to create.
That's correct.
Is that the 5 acres that like?
Well, that somebody would have to have 5 acres to select that zone to overlay it onto that property, yes. We, again, are just doing the text.
Right.
To have it in our zoning regulation for a person to select that text.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see it come back with looking at specifically at those zones.
I'm sorry?
I'd like to see us come back specifically and look at the text of those zones and see what the impact would be. Because if we're adding it to an existing zone, we're not changing it for just this one property now, potentially one property. It's changing it across the city. Wherever
it's not
those zones
changing
are.
it yet. It's somebody could elect that to come to you all to ask to be changed, yes. doing the text didn't allow on somebody just to go in there and do it. They would have to select that text to overlay. In this, this gentleman would have to come in and say, I'm going to file an application to change this property from R1F to the PO1. Then it goes through the planning commission process back to the city.
But we're also adding additional uses to existing zones of the PO1, right?
As
And that's the
conditional,
piece that I'd like to
as
understand.
conditional uses, yes.
Yeah.
I can get that to you, sure. I can put that together and just lay it all out, what it would look like. I'd be more than happy to do that.
So is the thought to still continue on? Is that what you're thinking?
In my opinion,
Gary?
no. I think if we continue on right now, we're kind of going at it blindly.
Yeah.
Not having all the information we need to just make an educated decision.
Well, I'll get that
But that's,
to you
know,
all, and
that's just my opinion.
I can do
We
that.
can look
Not a
at it.
problem.
Don't cost nothing to look.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine.
So we table it until we get more information?
I will get it to you all.
Okay.
Thanks, Ted.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, sir.
All right, then the next item on the agenda under progress and revitalization is blighted property. Mrs. Pitts, Mr. Cahill?
Sure.
Is this,
Have we just,
But to be quite honest, we saw this one on here and we thought it was going to be Mr. Gatlin's.
okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
That's fine. So if we recall, we discussed at the last committee meeting, I think at length, that the KRS 99, and I apologize, I'm looking at it on my phone, and I forgot to bring my tablet in from the car. KRS 99700 through KRS 99730 has been changed as of July 16th, so it's changed now. And what it would allow is a little easier process to acquire property that's vacant property, that's blighted property by eminent domain. But a provision of that statute and provision of that KRS is whether we ever want to do this or not, we have to establish a vacant property review commission. That by statute, the city has to pass an ordinance that creates this vacant property review commission, that the vacant property review commission has very specific tasks or very specific definitions of what blighted property is under the new KRS, and they have to make a finding, and then ultimately that vacant property review commission makes a recommendation to this council to move forward with eminent domain or some other less aggressive stance. Does everyone recall last month that we had a pretty long discussion on all of that last month?
Is that right, though? We can add in stuff, but we can't take anything out.
Well, we could not reduce that definition of blighted. So we could not make it a lighter definition than what the KRS says. We certainly could. We certainly could. So we've prepared sort of a very ghost ordinance, just sort of walking through this. Also, since Mr. Francis this is an issue that's very relevant to him. The mayor and I actually had lunch with Mr. Francis about a week and a half ago. It's a very pleasant lunch. It's really amazing, and I almost wish he was here tonight because I think he would agree. It's amazing when you can one-on-one meet with someone for an hour and a half to 2 hours, and you can explain the foreclosure process, that you can explain the code enforcement process, that you can explain all of the steps and all of the statutory requirements for why this takes as long as it does. That, you know, he kind of at the end I think was more understanding of the situation.
Plus you fed him.
That's true, we did feed him. We did feed him. And that was Applebee's, so I mean, it wasn't, you know, it was a low bar, but yeah, we fed him. We fed him. What was kind of funny is the mayor was a few minutes late, so we had a very deep philosophical debate for about 20 minutes on religion. And we determined that once we hit that topic, that this was easy, right? Yeah. So getting into a philosophical religious debate with a PhD minister, not the smartest move in the world, but allowed him to win and allowed him to be really smart. Which he's a good guy. I mean that in the best. Spending an hour and a half, 2 hours with him, he's a really neat guy. All that being said, I think we need some guidance from council as to how aggressive we want to get with this process. Because we can create this commission, and by statute, the commission has certain requirements. This proposed ordinance, I think we have determined that we're going to do the mayor with approval of council, because the statute requires that, shall appoint 5 members to the Property Review Commission to staggered terms, with 2 initial members' terms expiring December 31, 2017, and 3 initial members expiring December 31, 2018, and then subsequent appointments shall be for a term of 2 years. The members shall be property owners within the city of Erlanger and shall attend at a minimum 1 training session provided by the city of Erlanger or other approved authority. And this comes right out of the statute, that no officer or employee of the local government whose duties include enforcement of housing, building, plumbing, fire, nuisance, or related codes shall be appointed to the commission, and that members shall receive a reimbursement of $25 for each meeting they attend. Now that's the makeup of the commission, but I think we need to have a broader discussion, and I'll let the mayor or someone else lead that, as to what we actually want this commission to do. Because it's one thing creating an ordinance that creates a commission, but it's another thing actually having them do something.
Yeah, JD, go ahead.
After what we went through on Stevenson Road and Cowie, I think we need to take an aggressive stance on this, because it's taken us forever on these properties and we still don't have anything in sight. So my thing is, I think we ought to be really aggressive on these type properties.
But would you mind talking about the process of the eminent domain process, and maybe even a projected timeline?
Yeah. So a couple of key things with the eminent domain process. Obviously the eminent domain process is somewhat similar to a foreclosure, other than you have to establish the value of that property up front. So we made this point a month ago, and I think it's very important for council to understand this, that if we declare a property blighted and we choose as our remedy, and we don't have to choose this as a remedy. In fact, the model ordinance the ordinance that we're kind of proposing, we're saying, hey, this vacant property review commission, prior to certifying it to council, should take all reasonable steps to work with the property owner, including but not limited to meeting with the property owner to determine causes of the blighted condition, working with realtors to assist them in listing the property for sale, working with code enforcement to establish a mitigation plan, and working with other creditors, lien holders to work on a mitigation plan. And that also, prior to this commission determining that property is blighted or deteriorated, that the committee would express in writing their options to deal with the property, along with a budget to complete the work required, all prior to eminent domain. So the idea of the ordinance is there's going to be some very stair-step type remedies prior to getting to the eminent domain. But to answer your question, Mayor, it's a lawsuit. We would have to get a fair market value of the property. We have to reimburse the person for fair market value of the property, and then we have to take the property through that process of eminent domain. All this statute allows us to do is to take property by eminent domain if it meets the definition of blighted. But this is a brand new law as of July 16th, and obviously if we're going to be taking property and someone is not happy with the value that we propose, or they just don't want their property taken, they're going to fight that eminent domain process. And that's going to take 12, 18, 24 months if it's tied up in the Court of Appeals. I mean, it could be 3 to 5 years. So this is not, and I can't underscore this enough, this is not simply, hey, we've now declared this property blighted, we get it. The only real difference, I mean, there's a lot of differences between going through eminent domain and going through foreclosure, but the main difference is with eminent domain, you set that value up front, and you either agree to that value with the property owner, or you convince a court that that's fair market value. With foreclosure, it's just going to an open bidder at the end. The other main difference is the city now would hold title to that property as the eminent domain, through the eminent domain process. Through the foreclosure process or some of these other processes we would have, the city could choose to bid on the property, or you could allow someone else to bid on the property. So, I mean, those are all things that I think we just have to consider and have, like I said, a fairly broad discussion on. Because it's not going to be cheap to take down one of these properties. Take the properties that Mr. Francis is complaining about. And we were talking about that. I don't know what the fair market value of those properties are, 80 grand, 100 grand, it's something. It's more than $1, like in Covington.
Last weekend, that guy was working his butt on that property across from him that he was complained about up there on the corner. He's painted that front shutters and everything. He's cleaned all those bushes out and everything around that house. So, I mean, what we've done is done something because the guy's
Right.
working on it.
Right. And I think the idea of this vacant property commission is that you would have citizens, private citizens who make up this commission that could maybe help motivate people. Maybe it's a little less threatening than a letter from a lawyer or code enforcement knocking on your door. I think that's the concept. But ultimately, the purpose of this statute was to allow cities, through eminent domain, to take property. Again, it was Louisville that pushed this. Covington kind of came on board a little late with some changes when it went through the legislature. But in Louisville particularly, a lot of these are public-private partnerships where they're taking down entire blocks. It's a little different situation than we have here in Erlanger.
See, I don't like the eminent domain. I think the foreclosure is the way I would like to go. I mean, like you said, you could be 3 to 5 years with all that.
Gonna be slow.
Well, I know, but you could sell them at the courthouse on the
weigh in?
on
I'd
the
like to make some
foreclosure.
comments.
Okay.
First question is, Jack, if a property is blighted according to the statute, isn't it also subject to codes enforcement?
Sure.
All right. Given that, in my opinion, the process of this that is being described to you has a number of deficiencies in it. Number one, in response to you, JD, it is not faster. I'll guarantee you it will not be faster. Problem is you have to go through the process with the commission, get them to determine that it's blighted. Then you have to go through the eminent domain proceeding, which requires you to get the property appraised, file the suit. The property owner will defend that suit. They'll get their appraisers, so you'll have a high and a low. And the difference between eminent domain, the main difference, that's, in my opinion, detrimental to the city, is that the determination of the value of that property is determined by a jury. In the codes enforcement process, it is not. The value, the property is appraised by court-appointed appraisers. The real value is determined at the public sale where it's bid in. I cannot emphasize to you strongly enough the difference between a jury setting the value and the foreclosure process and the code enforcement process is the code process is much more favorable to the cities. And the property on Cowie is a good example of that. That property obviously has some value. The city bought it for much less than the lot is worth. We bought that property for $6,000, as I recall. In an eminent domain process, I'll guarantee you, you'd have paid $25,000 for it at least. So I really don't see the advantage of the review commission when it's compared to the process we're using now. If you can explain an advantage, I'll be glad to listen to it, but that's my opinion right now.
That's how I feel, the same.
I stand
exactly.
corrected. I appreciate your honesty. I mean, I just feel it, I'm just tired of waiting and what's going on with these properties here in Erlanger is ridiculous.
Well,
It's the way it is everywhere. I understand that. It seems
well,
like there should be a
but
faster way.
but the example you're using on Stevenson Road is an aberration.